Good afternoon everyone, welcome to another YouTube video. And I have the privilege and honor of sitting with Mr. Harjeet Singh, who is the International Coordinator, Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Adaptation Expert who is currently working in ActionAid. Thank you sir for coming to lead Islamabad office. Sir, my first question to you is regarding your presentation. You talked about how South Asia is the most vulnerable region right now. Can you kindly elaborate and shed some light on this issue?
South Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions in the world, and if you look at the number of disasters we are facing, and especially the quite intense disasters which are affecting a lot many people in this part of the world, and the economic impact we have, it is one of the most vulnerable regions. And the major disasters that have hit this region are largely climate. So it's quite evident that climate change is increasing what we call the intensity and frequency of disasters in this particular region. And if you look at poverty levels, which are very high in this region, so in South Asia, if you find that there are much more poor people and who are regularly being hit by these major disasters, which means that people who have little capacity to cope are now facing with unprecedented number and intensity of disasters that makes them even poorer, and they are never able to come out of their vicious poverty cycle. So this is one of the most vulnerable region which is going to get impacted by climate change. It is already facing the brunt of climate change.
Alright, you talked about how vulnerable we are, and it's a vicious cycle. What challenges do you foresee between the governments of India and Pakistan, not just the governments but international organizations and think tanks and NGOs? How do you think we can improve the lines of communication, and how can we cooperate one another to overcome the challenges?
Sure. We were already struggling to meet our development indicators. We were already struggling to make sure that people get the gains of development. We find economic growth happening in this region, but you find that poor people have not been able to enjoy the fruits of that economic growth. While we were struggling to make sure that they are part of that development process, and we are now coming across with another challenge of climate change, which has changed the entire paradigm. That means the development strategies that we were adopting are not really working. If you look at the solutions that we were working on disaster management, these were much more national centric. We were not looking at issues that are cross-border. It could be between India and Pakistan, or between India and Nepal and Nepal and Bangladesh together, or between India and Bhutan. We have been knowing about these issues, but we have been looking at it much more from our own national interest. I think climate emphasizes that we all are part of one ecosystem, and the problems that we are faced are so interconnected that we can't just look at our own solutions which are serving interest of one particular country. We have to look at it how we can come up with solutions which are suitable and compatible for all the countries together. That's one change that we have to bring in our planning processes. So we have to grow beyond our national interest. I'm not saying you leave your national interest. National interest is going to be there because that's how the politics is there. But then you grow beyond that and see how I can align my national and regional interest. And my national interest should not harm. And climate provides that opportunity. So on one hand, it's a big challenge. On the other hand, it's a fantastic opportunity for us to come together. And there has been positive movement. If you look at the SARC level discussion, which is our regional body, we had one full summit dedicated entirely on climate change, which happened in Bhutan. And now we are coming up with declaration. The only challenge is sometimes these are only words and they don't get translated into actions. And that's what we have to do now, to make sure that what we have agreed upon, what we have decided upon, now needs to be turned into action.
We're talking about tangible action, and one of your key points of the presentation was about local adaptation plans. Can you just give me an overview of how far has India made progress regarding local adaptation strategies, and is there any one good lesson learned that you want to share with the rest of your regional partners?
India is still learning on adaptation. While some good policy steps have been taken, we have come out with a national plan. There are 8 missions in our national plan, which was formulated in 2008, and 5 of these mission documents are actually dealing with adaptation. And when you talk of disaster, in fact, India is also learning a lot from its disaster management experience, and I would say on which it has done quite okay. If we are still not there, we can say that we are 100% prepared, but we are doing well. In fact, when we were working on disaster management, we influenced the National Disaster Management Authority to actually start looking at how do you make community-based development plans, community-based disaster risk reduction plans. So I think the understanding is now there that we have to do work at the community level. We have to make sure that the plans emerge from the bottom and then they connect with the national plans and national policies. That thinking is there. Now what we have to do is to make sure that thinking gets linked with the adaptation plan. Adaptation, let's understand, it's a new thing. Not all departments and ministries are aware about it. So first step would be to make sure that these ministries and departments start interacting with each other, because the issues are so connected. Water and agriculture are so connected. So disaster management is connected with all these units. And now in adaptation you have to plan for much ahead. You are not just talking of 10-20 years. You have to look at climatic models which are going to affect you 50 years from now. So that interaction has begun, but there is a long way to go. But I would say that they have understood the value of developing community-based plans. What we don't have right now is infrastructure and the mindset in government authorities to make sure that they are able to come out. That's where what we are seeing right now is partnership between civil society and government. So that's where those partnerships are going to make sure that the civil society organizations who have a good connection at the grassroots and then local authorities, they come together. That I think is emerging as a good example.
Right, and thank you so much. But my last question is, in your present is very unpredictable. What is the future in the next 5 years? What are going to be the key climate change threats to India, Pakistan and the region? There is so much unpredictability, but can we predict something?
I think food security is going to be a big issue here. I mean, the way there is a variability in climate now which directly impacts our water availability and agriculture. Which means food is going to be much more scarce. We have been through a food crisis. We see increased number of droughts, floods destroying our crops. That's going to be a major crisis. And how we are going to manage that, that's going to be key. And particularly the water sector and agriculture. So there is work happening in terms of doing a lot more research, looking at the traditional seed varieties, looking at the use of fertilizer. I would say a very balanced use of fertilizers. What kind of strategies and agriculture practices would work in different geoclimatic zones. And that's where India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, we all can learn from each other. We all are working on some of these practices. So we are going to see food security as a major threat. And let's understand, if climate issue is not tackled, it is also going to have some kind of security threat, because if one country does not have sufficient food and sufficient livelihood, or they lose their land to increasing sea levels, there's going to be massive migration. And so the movement is going to be within South Asia, and which is going to cause another security problem. So there are going to be massive issues. So we need to now come stronger as a region and deal with this issue holistically.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harjeet Singh.